My name's Bradley Goff, or I go by Brad. Grew up in Holt, Michigan, little suburb of Lansing, really close to Michigan State University.
My name's Jim McGraw. Grew up in a small town north of here, north of East Lansing, called Chesaning. It's got a population approximately maybe 2,500, I would guess. Hasn't changed much over the years.
My name's Andrew Sandstedt. I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. Lived over not too far from Frandor in the Grossbeck neighborhood for most all my childhood, except for like a brief 3-year period where my dad took a job in Texas when I was in junior high years. Then we moved back about 5 blocks away from my old house.
I'm an oil painter. It takes much longer to dry than acrylic paint. I kind of liked that fact. Paint wasn't going to dry right away, and I had a little bit longer to work with it. I like the fluid feel to it, and the way you can manipulate it by adding like linseed oil and turpentine to get different effects. It has its pros and cons. Sometimes the con can be that it takes so long to dry, because if you're doing a commission and there's a deadline, I paint really thick, so the paintings can take like almost a month to fully cure before you're going to want to give it to the client. Every painting I make, I learn. So right now I'm still learning how to oil paint, basically.
I primarily use watercolors. I always found those hard to do, but I always liked them. In the last few years, I've tried to develop more into oil painting, and occasionally I use acrylics. So I've tried to use different mediums for my art, and I still prefer probably watercolors. I'm more comfortable with those. Early on I did some people, I did some portraitures, mostly now landscapes.
I'll do a little bit of everything. It's kind of gone through like ebbs and flows over the years. Probably most of the work I get paid for is all metal work. I do a lot of trophies, I do some signs, I do sculpture. My drawing and painting background has really helped as a sculptor, because now learning line work with drawing, how does that translate from looking at it on 2D paper or a wall to a 3D object, and vice versa.
Caught up in a wild that summer, rolling in thunder. Started as a welcome friend like any other June. Looking for an honesty I couldn't find in nobody. Love to bring home with me, then summer gave me you.
Had a typical childhood. I have a sister, her name's Jen. We're 18 months apart. We're pretty close growing up. Had the typical sibling rivalries going on. She's got 2 sons, Bryce and CJ. My mother, she worked for the state of Michigan for a number of years, retired from there, and went and got her master's degree into a second career, and she works in the finance department at Michigan State University. Extremely supportive of my art career. If it wasn't for her, I might not be doing this. My dad, he retired from GM for 30 years, and then after that had a very successful career as a home inspector.
I was the only child. My parents were both from that area. My mother worked part-time. My dad worked for the highway department. My dad was in World War II. He spent, I think, close to 3 years in the jungles of New Guinea. Very tumultuous time for him in his life, and he suffered what you'd call post-traumatic stress disorder. They call it something different then, but he made the best of his life. He would have horrible nightmares at night, but he did get up and work, even though it was hard for him to do that. So I have a lot of respect for him being able to do that. No, as the only child, I had cousins that lived next to me. Both sides are a fairly small family, so my cousins were all like brothers and sisters to me.
I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me. Super close, really, probably my best friend, and he lives over in Holland, Michigan. When I was young, my dad had worked for Meridian Township as a zoning and planning. He's always been in some type of business financing, consulting. He actually enlisted in the Naval Reserve his junior year of high school because so many people were getting drafted. He and my mom a year after they both graduated. They got married when they were 19. They lived in Scotland and Morocco, and they were in that part of the world. So growing up, my mom was a nurse. We didn't go to the doctor a lot. A lot of times she just said, oh, I know what's going on. And she never really worked full time, so a lot of times she was there, after school and always there for our sports things that we played, and they're both retired now. So
Got married to my wife Jen. It'll be 15 years in May that we've been together, and we've been married for coming up on 10 years now. He's currently director of marketing at a medical device company. Outgoing, bubbly personality. I call her the smiley emoji. It's great because I'm a little more of the introverted type naturally. So she brings out a little more in me.
I got married in 1964 to my wife Pat. Been married for going on 54 years now.
I have 4 boys, young men now. They're 20, 19, 16, and 14.
My son Archer, he's gonna be 5 in about a month. Yeah, he's just the light of my life. Great mixture between Jen and I. Makes me smile and laugh every day. And my little buddy, we spend a lot of time together.
I have 2 adult sons, Eldon and John, and their extended families.
They're all creative in their own different ways. My oldest son is learning, CNC machining and programming, is definitely of the technical bend. He likes working with his hands for sure. What I've enjoyed with him on some of this sculpture competition I did last year is giving him tasks and then letting him see that this is what it is and we're okay with that. We're just going to do it. And the sculpture we did got 2nd place and auctioned for the most money. My 19-year-old, he works at a restaurant. He's trying to figure out some things in life and what he wants to do, but he's a super hard worker. He has a creative bend to him as well.
He loves to paint, loves to be just like Daddy. He cheers me on when I'm painting. It's hilarious. Love watching him grow and teaching him everything I can. He teaches me stuff every day, so the best thing that's ever happened to me for sure.
My 16-year-old is actually taking new media at the Career Center. He thought he wanted to go into photography, and now he's really liking a lot of the sound editing. It's given him some good exposure and realizing oh, this is a little harder than I thought it was, but this I enjoy more. My youngest just turned 14. He's probably my most creative one. He's 14 going on 40. He's a real salesman. Last year at Scrap Fest, he said, Dad, I'll man the booth if you want to get something to eat. I'll sell some stuff. And I come back, he's like, I sold 2 pieces. I'm like, what? And he's passionate about it. So and he's really engaging with people. And so I said, hey, as an artist, that's a really good quality to have because people aren't just buying the artwork, they're buying you. Sometimes they're as different as the day is long with stuff, but yeah, love them to pieces. So I wouldn't trade them for the world.
When I really remember getting into art was probably 10th grade. I took my first high school art class and seemed to have a knack for it. I got exposed to quite a few of the different mediums. At first it was just drawing and then paints and some of the painting classes, 3D mixed media art classes, except for I didn't do any pottery or any ceramics yet in high school. I didn't have one medium or anything that I was really chasing. It was just art in general.
I would say when I was probably maybe 10 years old, I drew a picture of Mount Vernon, Washington's home, and I kind of liked it. A lot of people liked it. I had a music teacher who went by with a little tuning fork and said I had no talent in music at all. So I thought, well, maybe I got a little talent in art.
I guess my first love for drawing was in elementary school. You write a book, so you have to illustrate your book and write a story. I remember I won first place at my school and first place at the district. I wrote this book called Tom the Baseball, and it was a little life story and all these different things. And I was always just, drawing.
Probably my most influential teacher, her name was Miss Anderson, also known as Miss Grow. Amazing art teacher, really good at teaching me the fundamentals of art. A lot of artists, they don't know they have the abilities until they get those first lessons and get a base going. And yeah, she's probably the person who started my art career, if you will.
Another thing that was a big influence, I had a teacher in high school, early high school. I took mechanical drafting, and he was a great influence because he was very meticulous in what he wanted you to do. And he also was a cool guy because he let you have a radio in the class. And so you'd be drafting, He could talk, he could interact with people. And he also encouraged us to do some free drawings of some buildings that were outside the classroom window. So he's a pretty good influence too, I thought.
My high school art teacher was and still is one of the biggest influences on me as an artist, Mark Mahaffey. Super cool because he on his own right is like a world-class artist. I knew he was a good artist just from the work he did when I was in high school, but then, past high school, the way we stayed in touch, and I've seen his work, I'm like, man, I learned a lot of art, from an amazing, amazing artist in person. Throughout the years, I remember I did some paintings about 5 years ago for Art Walk. You bring your artwork, it's on display for a week or two, whatever it is, and then people come, for the Art Walk and they can vote on things, it's jury. When I was taking my art to the location where I was exhibiting at, I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden I see Mark. He comes up and gives me a big hug. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm actually in Art Walk this year. And I knew he was just because of when I saw the list of artists and stuff. He's like, where's your stuff? Let's go see it. Like right away, whatever he was doing, I don't know where he was going, but he was like, let's go see your work.
Probably the first artist that I really admired was Van Gogh. I went to for inspiration. I really liked the way he used the oil paint, and I remember my mom took me to the Detroit Institute of Arts when the Van Gogh exhibit was in town. That was a big deal for me.
I always liked Salvador Dali because he always had these wild expressions on his face and stuff, and I always liked the color and the kind of the abstractness of his paintings.
Well, definitely Pablo Picasso is a huge influence. He was pushing boundaries, but he was doing so many different things. I mean, he's kind of a classically trained as a child and was, could paint all these amazing, Renaissance pieces and just, like the old masters, but then was kind of, I don't want to say bored with it, but kind of, just disgruntled with it and said, how can I push this different? And
I just remember driving home from the museum and seeing the trees in a different way. Everything was moving and I could see the brush strokes and everything I was looking at.
And then on the far other side, I like Norman Rockwell's. I would see those in the magazines of the day. I liked the expression he did. I liked the people in it. I just thought it was very interesting.
More contemporary guys too, like Jasper Johns. I mean, look at like some of it looks very simple at first glance, or like Mark Rothko. You look at these, oh, it's very monochromatic, like 2-color blocks. But when you see them in person, get 6 inches away from it, start backing up slowly, you'll see all these underpainting tones that are coming out, and move your head from side to side in a different angle. And all of a sudden it's a whole nother level.
The other art I liked was comic books. They were colorful. I liked to read them. So that was another avenue of art I saw.
I think from a sculpture standpoint, hands down, Albert Paley is one of my sculpture heroes. I mean, he's in his 70s and he's still working as an artist, and he has a huge studio in New York, and he makes, upwards of 125-foot tall sculptures, or his candlesticks. You're like, okay, that's a 30-inch candlestick, but I can also see that as a 75-foot sculpture somewhere. So I think an artist like him has still stayed true to his form, right? He still has a style.
Went to Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I didn't have a decided major for sure yet, but shortly thereafter, after I started, I did go towards the art education path. So I went to school to be an art teacher.
And then I came to MSU to go to college. I got a degree in psychology. I was a little bit older student, but it was something I wanted to do since I was young, and I was able to accomplish that.
To Lansing Eastern, LCC, and
did a lot of research on different ceramics and pottery artists. Got to know Stephen Hill. He was a potter. He was living in Kansas City at the time. I went down to do some workshops with him.
I did take a correspondence course in my late 60s. It was the first time I ever took a formal course.
Found a guy, his name's Andre Martinez, and he's out in Denver. It's the School of Applied Arts, and it was a technique school. I wanted to learn at a foundational level, how do you do some of these things? It's really learning like how the masters did it.
So it was a week-long workshop. I think this was 2003, getting towards the end of my college career. I had to get my own hotel room and drive out there by myself, and so that was a cool experience. He had all of his wares out and was served us really nice coffee in the mugs that he made, and some croissants were on the plate. Going through college, I thought he was like just one of the lucky ones. The whole starving artist mentality, that you couldn't really make money doing artwork and selling it. You'd have to find a different avenue, such as teaching.
And I've also been taking a class with a lady who's an instructor, and it's a nice class. It's informal. It's not a rigid class, but she teaches you a lot, and there's other people in the class that are very helpful. It's a small class, so I've learned a lot just by being around other artists.
I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from spending a week with Andre was he really pushed this premise of no matter what you choose as your craft, whether you're a painter, a sculptor, a carpenter, a blacksmith, I mean, you name it. If you have a craft that you're working on and developing, he said there's three things that you're doing. One is you're always learning your craft. Two, you're always doing your craft. And the third point, which I think is like really the most critical in terms of taking your skills to the next level, is always teaching your craft.
So that's leads into the period in my life, probably 7-8 years, where I kind of got out of art for a while.
I had quite a long period where I did do a lot every year, and the last 4 or 5 years I've really extended myself in doing a lot more.
I was working for the State Journal, and they made a bunch of cuts at the time, so a lot of us that were like upper level sales and other positions, they just removed those positions from the company, so I was out of work for about a month.
So after my wife Jen graduated, she's like, hey, I got a job offer out in California. And I was just finishing up a semester of teaching and wasn't really feeling it. So I'm like, all right, I'll move out there with you. And so when I first moved out there, I worked at a mutual fund company. In hindsight, that taught me a lot that I use in my art career now, just how to be professional, how to talk to people over the phone.
Early on, I did more of pictures, would follow pictures. And then I tried really hard to develop a sense of creating my own stuff.
And my two oldest boys, I think we're like in first and second grade at the time, I was like, I'm gonna do some murals in their bedroom wall. So I just started doing kind of real graphic novel style, kind of comic book style, heavy black lines, lots of contrast of just like an elephant and a giraffe and some other jungle animals. And their mom, my ex-wife, she was at a baby shower and was telling a designer about, oh yeah, he's doing these murals for the room, and the designer said something, oh, is he doing that professionally? She said, no, well, there's a good market for, custom murals and painting and stuff. And so I kind of looked into, what's all this decorative painting about and plastering, and I was kind of drawn to it.
So over those years, while I was doing other jobs, I didn't have pottery available to me because you need a wheel, a kiln, a pretty big setup. So I decided to make my creative outlet painting. I made a small elephant painting for my son's room to have in there before he was born, and people really liked it and kept encouraging me, especially my mom and my wife Jen.
As you're watching this video, you probably aren't seeing a sense of humor in me. I do have a sense of humor, and I like to kind of look at life a little different. I've always liked cartooning, so somewhere cartooning must have influenced some of my paintings, but I'd like just to, maybe it's not a shock value, it's just try to be a little bit unusual, just a little bit off center on some of them. Not all of them, of course, but I have fun with them. That's the idea. I like to have fun with them.
How to MIG weld and how to join pieces of metal together, different angles, how to use a handheld plasma cutter, how to use the bandsaw. And I was just like, I love this working with metal. It was just just being real tactile like that, and see the instant change. You take two pieces of steel and all of a sudden a little electricity, and now you have one piece of steel. I just thought that was so cool.
So as an artist, you're encouraged, if you want to sell artwork, to find kind of a niche. I do a lot of abstract seascapes or marina scenes, oars and paddles, deer, just kind of stuff you'd find around Michigan that is Michigan outdoor related. But when you do it in a series, then each painting kind of grows on itself, and you're kind of learning from one painting to the next, and then you can produce a lot more numbers that way. So there's a lot of great things to be said, I feel, about producing artwork in series.
I've done a couple recently of mermaids. One is releasing fish, little small fish from a bowl back into the sea. And another mermaid is just holding on to a seal.
Last year, I recruited a couple guys the previous 2 years for Scrap Fest, and we got second place 2 years ago, first place last year. Just keep honing in those designs and skill sets. I know what I'm good at, what other people are better at, so I get those people around me.
So I'll start out making a base layer of all just one solid color with quite a bit of turpentine in it to help it dry a little faster and adhere to the canvas. And then I'm waiting for it to get to this kind of just right consistency, and I'll come back to it the next day or maybe the day after that and just kind of run my paintbrush over it and see the tackiness. And once it gets to the right tackiness, then I know I can start pulling out my palette knives and add more paint to it.
I created a small painting with construction barrels put in a vase to look like flowers, and I would call it Michigan flowers or spring flowers, because construction barrels pop up in the spring like spring flowers do. And I've been to some craft shows and art shows, and people have seen it and they go, well, that's not a real flower. What are you doing here? And they just kind of don't get the funny gist of it, I guess. It's a little out there.
Like, okay, we're gonna do a big piece. It has to have a theme, it has to have some continuity. You know, what's the overall aesthetic of that? You know, it's been real helpful with all the projects I've done to kind of bring that all together.
And get a certain way the next paint sticks to the previous paint and flows down. Sometimes it gets kind of too wet and loose to add more color, so I'll have to let it sit for a couple more days to get to the right consistency once again to add more paint. I don't know if it's flow painting, kind of the way the strokes come down the painting. If it was all wet or a fresh painting, the paint wouldn't come off the palette knife that way. It would just come off in one big blob. You know, with experimenting, painting after painting, I know right when to apply that paint. So I get an effect that a lot of other people can't.
Saw a picture a long time ago of Michelangelo created, I think the person's Jeremiah. It was from the Sistine Chapel. And so I did a small rudimentary watercolor with it. A couple years ago I came across that painting, and I thought, you know, I'm going to make a big one of this. And so I used my dad's technique, squared it off. It's a pretty big picture. I think it's approximately 4 by 5 feet. The picture originally reminded me of my dad a little bit. Just the stance he had, the way he would set. So what I did was decided to do that great big picture of it just because I thought it looked kind of cool. Not so much that I was a big fan of Michelangelo per se. It just had more of a personal meaning to me.
My grandpa Ralph, he passed away a number of years ago, but he was an amazing, really amazing woodworker. Just fish carvings and duck decoys, and worked a lot with wood. So that was his creative outlet. But yeah, he was very creative. I've been trying to figure that out, like kind of where my artistic knack came from, but I think it's kind of a mix from both sides of the family.
February of 2012, I made a decision in my life to reach out, get some help, and start the process of that road to recovery and getting sober. It's been a lot of ups and downs in 7 years of some things, but I wouldn't change it for anything. I don't know if I'd be sitting here right now if I wouldn't have made that decision then, to be honest with you, just the way things were trending. It's a great thing. It's shaped the process of growth that's happened in my sobriety, has translated to every area of my life. And one of the things I've really embraced, and I think one of my styles of art, of using what I use for my materials, is a direct reflection of being in recovery. That restoration process that happens when you make that choice and get sober and go through that path. I think the reason why Scrap Fest resonates so much with me is we're taking materials that people either threw away, discarded, saying this doesn't really have that great of a purpose anymore. Right? So you go into a junkyard and here's drops from machining, here's old car parts and appliance, or people I made a conscious decision just to toss that stuff and get rid of it. And then as an artist, you go in and go like, that's the stuff I'm gonna take. And I'm gonna make something beautiful out of it. Oh, I'm gonna make all these butterflies? Yeah, let me take all these old aluminum signs, clean them, you know, polish them down, plasma cut it, and all of a sudden I have this great piece. And my art is a big reflection of my sobriety, because when you're active in your alcoholism or you're active in your addiction, you're just trying to numb out a bunch of stuff. So you're not even fully feeling. And I think when you can get as an artist to the place of like, yeah, I'm feeling this, the good, the bad, all of the in-between, like that's where the authenticity and that's where the realness can then get translated.
The more I got back into doing oil painting, it's kind of, that's when I felt most alive. It's almost like, I don't know if this term is like a painter's high, you know, when you're making a piece and everything's going good and you're feeling the flow. It's just this feeling that kind of can't explain. But then there's a counterpart to that. When you're trying to make a painting and it's not going good, then you can get kind of depressed at the same time. But I was noticing how just the art was having such a huge impact on the way I felt, and the more I did it, the more artwork I sold, the more I didn't want to do any other type of work. And it kind of came to the point where I decided, hey, I'm going to make a go at being an artist.